All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Fly Eagles Fly podcast. I'm your host, Jay, and I'm back again with another episode. So, episode number 21, we went over last week. We went over 2 games this time. Said I was going to be more consistent. So, here I'm again Tuesday making this. Hopefully, this is going to go up Wednesday. If you're hearing it should be up around 10 o'clock. But today we're going to be talking about Philadelphia versus Washington. I had this game a lot closer than it was. I just haven't been used to the Eagles actually being this good in a while. But let's just appreciate the fact that Jalen Hurts is putting everyone on notice, and that the work he was putting in the offseason was legit, and it's just good to see. Right. So, but without further ado, let's go ahead and let's throw some stats at you, and let's go ahead and do my couple takeaways from the game. So these are my takeaways. Number one is as Jalen Hurts was great. He had, let me go back here real quick. Jalen Hurts was 22 of 35, 340 yards, 3 tutties, and 0 interceptions. Really didn't run that much. Devontae Smith had a game. 8 receptions, 169 yards, 1 touchdown. And then A.J. Brown had 5 receptions for 85 yards and a touchdown. And then Goddard, that's kind of the big 3 receiving core. Goddard was 3 for 26. Nice little sidestep and a touchdown as well. So, offensive explosion. It was great. Miles Sanders also, he rushed for almost about 50 yards. I think it was like 48 yards on 12 rushes. And when you're passing as well as that, you don't really need to run. And plus, that's the strength. And we talked about it last week. That's the strength of the Washington defense, is right up the middle. Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, guys like that. Obviously, Chase Young didn't dress. Still dealing with an injury, but thank God, because that would have been pretty rough. Jalen Hurts was sacked 3 times, which I bet Carson Wentz would have taken that all day compared to what happened to him. He got sacked 9 times, which is the most this year by a defensive unit in the NFL, most in the game so far. And then I know Dallas came close last night against the Giants, but we'll talk about that a little later. But yeah, let's go into my first takeaway. Is obviously that Jalen Hurts is that guy, right? Jalen Hurts is that guy. He's an absolute. He's a savage. He's been working, and it's good to see. It's good to see that, because I think that you sort of had this stagnancy with Wentz, where it was like he came back, you knew what you were getting, you knew you were gonna get a couple real special throws, a couple, out of control, throws that he could just make, because he's so talented. But on a consistent basis, where you're going to see him take the checkdowns, where you're going to see him step up and read the defense, things like that just weren't really clicking. I don't know. A bunch of things can happen. You could talk about the coaching, you could talk about whatever, but it seems like Carson just sometimes has trouble with it. Not saying he doesn't know anything about football. Obviously, I know nothing compared to any player. I know even less than nothing when it comes to these NFL coaches who have been doing it for 20 plus years, whatever. So I'm just a guy that does a show out of his basement. So obviously I'm not sitting here trying to insult the guy in terms of what he knows about ball, but it's just a processing sometimes that could be an issue. And when you slow things down to a to 2 or 3 frames per second where the ball is just barely leaving, the hand, you're like, everything looks a lot slower, but it doesn't really necessarily look the same in real time. Right. But yeah, just something was not really clicking. And it was good to see that Jalen Hurts took a step last year, obviously going from starting the last 5 games to having go into the postseason under a first-year head coach, first-year play caller, and then seeing him take another step, because last year he was pretty good. Like last year, he showed how athletic he was. He was able to get out and run, and sort of that's kind of what comes with the improvising quarterback is, you look at Kyler Murray, you look at, even Josh Allen, right, where it's like you knew he had a cannon and you knew he was able to run, right? Then you saw him sort of showcase the cannon in his first year. Then the second year you saw him run and he did all those crazy hurdles and stuff like that, right? And then now this year you're seeing him put all that stuff together. You're seeing him throw with timing. You're seeing him put the ball where it needs to be. You're seeing him, you're seeing sort of him grow as a quarterback. And I think that that's kind of what's happening with Hurts as well. And I think Justin Herbert's another thing too, where out of the box, I mean, the dude came out and he was hot. But it seems like this year he took another step in terms of like, again, reading defenses, and the game seems to be slowing down for him. But yeah, it's just good to see that progression. And I think maybe it's exciting to see that Hurts is really the guy, and it feels great right now. It really does feel great. But again, football's a marathon, not a sprint. So I'm sure this is an up right now. I'm sure there's going to be downs, and I'm sure there's going to be ups again. So I'm just excited that we started off on an upswing. It's exciting. But let's talk about my takeaways here. I think the one thing that's going to bite the Eagles in the ass in the future, it's going to be the fact that they don't score late into games. I mean, if you just look at the scoring breakdowns, week 1, 0 points in the fourth quarter. Week 2 is 0 points in the fourth quarter. Week 3, 0 points in the fourth quarter. Now, week 1, they had a 17 or 20 something point lead, going into the half or starting the fourth quarter. So they didn't really have any incentive to score. And I understand that. Like in a lot of these, you're talking, this week was 24-8 beating the Commanders. And then last week was 24, I think it was 24-7. Then they beat the Vikings. So it's like they have these back-to-back blowout wins. So there's not really an incentive to score in the second half, but still, it seems like once they sort of go into halftime, teams make adjustments. It's only a matter of time before an offensive coordinator is going to see that and look at it, and I think that it may come with Jacksonville. Now look at Jacksonville. We talked about Justin Herbert. Look at what Jacksonville was able to do against them, and so for me, I think Jacksonville is probably going to be one of the more potent offenses they're going to face. I thought, obviously, Detroit was, they came out swinging for the fences. They lost an absolute heartbreaker to Minnesota. But at the same time, it's like Trevor Lawrence is starting to come into his own. I think he's six touchdowns to 1 interception or something like that in week 3. So he's obviously coming into his own. He threw 3 touchdowns versus the Chargers. So I think that we're really going to get pushed and really going to get tested by Jacksonville. I had them finish in second in the division. Didn't think they were going to win. Didn't think the Colts were going to be as bad as they were through the first 2 games. But I think that it's kind of troubling, and teams are just going to drag you out into deep water, and they're going to make you score in the fourth quarter, make you score in the third quarter. And the Eagles just haven't been doing that. Again, like I said, back-to-back blowout wins, where they jumped out to a big, 14-point, 21-point lead in the beginning and forced teams to sort of play one way, to score in bunches, and then they would sort of pin their ears back and go after you. Now, that's great, but then playing from behind when a team can still establish the run game, they can still, they can still throw off the play action, things like that. When that starts to happen, when you start to play like teams that are more cohesive, teams that have been playing together for a long time, like I look at the New York Giants. I think the Giants have taken a big step defensively this year. I think offensively as well too, but they've taken a big step defensively, and it's like you're not going to be able to score 21 points in the second quarter or 24 points in the second quarter against them. At least I don't think so. I mean, they scored 23 points. I think the Dallas Cowboys scored in the entire game. So, and that came sort of sprinkled throughout, evenly distributed, right? But I don't know. That's just something to keep an eye on, right? If you're like a religious watcher of the games, just keep an eye on the fact that sometimes they don't score late in the games. And it makes sense if it's that far out, it's whatever. But just keep an eye on that, because I think that kind of creates bad habits. You look at Arizona last year and the year before, started off hot, 5-0, right? And then they met some real serious playoff contenders, and then that physicality wasn't necessarily there all game. But they showed a lot of good things last year. I think against the Buccaneers, they showed some grit to come back and just be in that game. So I think this team knows how to play, but it's just about getting the juices flowing. And again, this is week 3, So like I said, week 4, 5, 6 is really when things start to shake out and you start to really see who's who, and the teams will start to take a step back or start to take a step forward and so on and so forth. So this is just sort of the first quarter of the season. And we'll see, but just keep an eye out for that. And, maybe we get tested against Jacksonville and maybe we come out victorious. Who knows? Right. So that is one of my takeaways. The other one is the defense seems to be doing the opposite. They seem to be like the offense started off hot. The defense started off a bit slow, and they they picked it up and they had 9 sacks. Again, that's the most in the NFL this far this year, 9 sacks by a defensive unit. Darius Slay had 2 interceptions. He's tied right for first with 2 interceptions. It was good to see Hassan Reddick getting in on the action. Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, those guys returned to midseason form last year. It was good to see those guys go out there and make the plays that they did. That was certainly that was a sight for sore eyes. That was something that that a lot of people. Sorry if you hear the dog barking, but it was something that a lot of people pegged as the Eagles' strength, and that was the offensive and defensive line. So it's good to see them finally coming together. And obviously the offensive line is still solid, still great. Not great, but still is considered top tier. And then something else to keep an eye on, Landon Dickerson was kind of in and out of the lineup towards the end of the game. He was questionable coming into the game after he injured his foot on Friday during practice. And so but Dickerson came in and played, I think, good the first 2.5 quarters, and then Suo Opeta came in and relieved him for a little bit, and then he was back out towards the end of the game. So, just something to keep an eye on. And then last thing is Sirianni, right? I think a lot of people are talking about Jalen Hurts, but I think Sirianni has done something that not a lot of first or second year coaches do, which is he's given up the play calling so that they could be effective they could be more effective situationally. And oftentimes you kind of see that with some of the coaches that call their own plays. Sometimes the situation, depending on what it is, you're going to go into it with your own philosophy. And sometimes that is, hey, go for it on 4th down like Doug Peterson was, or, kick a field goal or whatever. It's a different philosophy for everyone. And so, to give up that play calling in favor of, hey, let me just sort of detach from the game and the chess match that's being played, and let me kind of, be an overall coach and check in on this position group and check in on that guy and, do this and that. And I think that was a very mature thing of him to do. I think that was something that Doug Peterson had an issue with, and why the Eagles may have had some shortcomings situationally at times. I have nothing but respect for him, and the team loves him. He's got a natural leader in Jalen Hurts. And I'm excited. It's been cool to watch, man. So let's go ahead and talk about one of the points of emphasis I had last week was how are they going to bottle up Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin? And McLaurin had 6 catches for 120 yards. He had 1 long ball of 45 yards that he caught. It looked like to be a blown coverage, honestly. And then Jahan Dotson had 2 catches for 10 yards. Curtis Samuel had 7 for 48. So obviously Carson Wentz got sacked. It wasn't it wasn't necessarily like it was a clinic on the for the front 7, but not necessarily on the back half in coverage and with the safeties and stuff like that. There were a couple blown coverages. You saw it against the Vikings with Irv Smith. You saw it with Terry McLaurin here. So it's going to happen. Again, it's a young group of guys, and they have Chauncey Gardner-Johnson who's starting, and this is only his 3rd game in the new system. So there's going to be times where he, kind of slips up, and you expect that though, from a guy literally he went through camp and everything on doing one thing, and then now he's trying to come here and learn everything on the fly. But thank God he's just physically he's so gifted, right, that he can just kind of, he can kind of make up for a lot of the shortcomings. So, so let's go ahead and talk about news around the league. So Bills fall to Tua, 21-19. Bills fall to 2-1. And Tua and the Dolphins move up to 3-0. Tua, they said he had a concussion, which it definitely looked like it. Like if you haven't seen the clip of him falling, I'll see if I can find a GIF. Maybe I can put it up. If I can find it, I'll put it up on the screen right now. Or if you're just listening, Tua essentially got pushed. He threw a pass, and then Matt Milano kind of pushed him, and he lost his balance, fell backwards, and kind of landed on like his low back. And then because he was falling backwards, his head kind of fell back and snapped and hit off the ground. And then he got up and he was kind of wobbly. It looked like his legs gave out and he fell to the ground, and he went back to concussion protocol. And they said he cleared it. They said it was a lower back and ankle issue. Now, I've had sciatica before, obviously nothing compared to this, but that kind of puts a damper on everything. Like, it doesn't matter what you're doing, right? If you have like low back issues or something hurts in your low back, like I've been at there's been times where I've been walking with sciatica and then my foot just goes numb, and I can't feel it and I kind of stumble a little bit. So that has definitely happened to me. I don't know if that's the situation here, but after hitting your head like that, it just looks like it looks awful to hit your head and then, and then sort of you wobbly and all over the place. So that's not necessarily like an excuse or something like that. But I think, you gotta kind of look at it. The NFLPA, the Players Association, looks like they are going to look into it and see what the situation is too. So that's going to be cool to see, sort of how that shakes out, if you will. So let's go ahead and transition to Chiefs now. Chiefs got upset by the Colts. Eric Bieniemy and Patrick Mahomes had like a little bit of a back and forth, which was people trying to make it seem like they were yelling at each other when in reality I don't really think they were. I think it was just kind of like, had a little back and forth in sort of in passing. You say what you say, I say what I say, I stop. We kind of have like a little thing. And it wasn't like it wasn't like Quinnen Williams and his defensive line coach where they were at each other's throat, like they were in like face to face screaming. That's more like a fight. I didn't think what Patrick Mahomes and Eric Bieniemy went through was a fight, or maybe it was like a verbal sort of, whatever, and then eventually kind of goes off. But all teams are going to do that, right? You're going to see teams that maybe not necessarily fight and cuss and yell at each other, but you're going to have a back and forth. You're in the heat of competition. You're in the heat of, your adrenaline's flowing, and sometimes you just feel like someone's not understanding you. It could be a misunderstanding. It's what it could be. It could have been a misunderstanding or whatever. And then you have kind of a back and forth, and people kind of blow it out of proportion because it's Mahomes. He's the face of the league pretty much. So I didn't think anything too much of it. Obviously, they lost. It was a frustrating loss. So, what are you going to do? That probably has something to do with it too. And then Chargers got absolutely obliterated by the Jags, 38-10. Lawrence was 28 for 39, 262 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 picks. That was cool. I mean, it's cool to see Lawrence sort of coming into his own now after people labeled him a bust after 1 year. I thought that was kind of interesting. I mean, listen, the Jaguars have been sort of running themselves into a wall for a long time. Like, they would not fire Doug Marrone. The owner is very patient, which is kind of a gift and a curse. It's nice because if you're a young guy and you're if you're a young coach and you're sort of coming into it, they give you an opportunity to like grow and sort of find your own. But then it's almost too patient to the point where now it's like, on one hand, I'm you're losing it consistently. You're just like, oh, maybe he'll get it together next year. But it's like after for like 6 years of maybe he'll get it together next year at some point, it should tell you, man, like this is over. This is done with. We got to move on. And finally it happened with Doug Marrone, and they were able to bring in another Doug Peterson there, and he did his thing. But yeah, it's good to see that that's finally paying off. Sorry, my phone went off. It's good to see that that's finally paying off for Jags fans. I know that they've had so many good years, or so many good players come in through the years, and they had a pretty good year back in 2017, I think it was. AFC Championship game. So it's good to see it paying off. Great to see a fan base, kind of happy with what's going on there. So let's go ahead and talk about the last thing, which is Dallas defeats the Giants 23-16. Cooper Rush was not lighting the world on fire. 21 for 31, 215 yards, and 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions. I'm trying to think here. I think for me personally, right, I don't think like there's going to be a quarterback controversy. I mean, I think he's only thrown 2 touchdown passes in the past 2 games. But he's just doing a good job. Cooper Rush, I mean, is just doing a good job of steering the ship. That's all he's doing. He's just steering the ship where it needs to go, getting the ball into the hands of guys that need to get the ball in their hands, feeding Noah Brown, feeding CeeDee Lamb, turn around and giving it to Pollard, giving it to Ezekiel Elliott, right? So he's just kind of steering the ship. He's making sure you don't hit any rocks and coral reefs and shit like that. Just kind of making sure, not really making any sudden movements, just making sure that you're on the course. And that's it, and that's all you can hope for in a quarterback. So I don't think he's going to he's not going to light the world on fire, but he's just going to sort of steer the ship until Dak gets back. And also they haven't really played outside of Cincinnati. They haven't really played like an offense or a defense that has like a star. You know what I mean? Like, Kayvon Thibodeau and Azeez Ojulari just came back like this. Like, Kayvon Thibodeau is making his NFL debut like last night. He made it, right? And then Azeez Ojulari, who we know is solid, is just coming back now. And you saw, even with good defensive lines, it takes a minute. It takes a little bit to get going and to get used to the game speed. So maybe they'll turn into something in the future, but as of right now, they made their debut in week 3. So it's going to take a little time for them to get, acclimated to game speed, and everything again. So, but yeah, I think they kind of got them early. Dallas was able to get that one out of the way early, kind of luck of the draw there. But if Cooper Rush is still there, when the fuck do they play? Week 5? It's going to be probably an issue, right, with the Eagles pass rush. At least in the middle, I think Tyler Smith, flowers where flowers are due, played a pretty good game last night. So, all right, let's go ahead and talk about the week 4 look ahead. We're just going to talk about the NFC East teams. 2 of them are playing each other in Dallas and Washington, but let's go ahead. This is the Eagles podcast. We talk about the Eagles first, birds first, fly, Eagles fly. Doug Peterson back at the Lnch. Exciting. He's going to go drive past the statue that they have for him at the Lnch, and he's going to go play at the Lnch again, which is amazing. That's going to be super fun to watch. I truly can't wait for that. That's going to be super fun. And then I think Trevor Lawrence is going to start. He's going to start early, man. He's going to continue that start. I think he's going to come out. I think he's going to start hot. I think he's going to start hot. I think there's just going to be a lot of points scored in the first and second quarter of this, and we're going to see what our offense can do down the stretch. I think the defensive line is going to eat. I think the defensive line is going to do great. But I think the offense needs to score points later on in the game. Those are my 3 takeaways. D-line's going to eat. Offense needs to score late in the games. And T-Law is going to start fast. Then let's talk about Chicago and the Giants. So Chicago's going to be at New York Giants. I think that the Giants are going to lose because that's the most potent offense they've played. Has been Chicago. Chicago has a good young quarterback. They have some pretty good wide receivers. Their weakness is that is that front five. They leave a lot to be desired, I think. On the offensive line, they leave a lot to be desired there. But I also think that because they have a young quarterback that can run, it's still potent, right? So I think the Giants are going to lose that 21-14. They had trouble with, Baker Mayfield, who we know is past his prime. They had trouble with guys like that, so I think it's only going to be more so with Chicago. And then Washington, I have Dallas winning that 24-14 by 10 points. I think that Washington has probably just as, if not, they have just as good as a defensive line as the Eagles do. I think it's not as deep with depth, but in terms of like stars, in terms of guys that could just get after the quarterback, they have Parsons, they have, they have Lawrence. You see what I'm saying? So I think those tackles, unfortunately, are going to be in for it again next week or this coming week, I should say. It's just a pass rush, and then Wentz just always ends up losing to Dallas, for some reason. So those are my look aheads. That's going to wrap the show up for me. I think these dogs are getting into some trouble upstairs, so I'm going to go check it out. But other than that, check out all the social medias. I always link them and everything. Be on the lookout for the video. I try to put it out around the same time. Follow all the social medias. Again, link in the bio to everything. If you enjoy, rate it, subscribe, do whatever you got to do. Love you guys. We'll talk to y'all next week. And hopefully we got a dub. Hopefully we're moving to 4-0. But today, 3-0 Eagles. One of the only two undefeated teams left. Fly Eagles fly. Let's go Birds. Love y'all. We out. Bye.